welcome to Crimepedia. My name is Cherry and I am your host this week. With me, as always, is my true crime BFF. It's Morgan.
Oh, Cherry.
Hello. It's almost Easter. It's probably the Easter holidays by the time you listen to this. So the kids are at home. You've probably not had a chance to do anything because you're probably off work looking after the kids. So hopefully for the next hour at least, we can keep you entertained and block the kids out.
Yeah, hopefully.
Parents need
Kids
a break.
will
They need all the breaks they can get this week. That's right.
Oh.
And this is 2 weeks now. The kids are off for 2 whole weeks.
Oh my God. 2 weeks.
So it's going to be all play
Easter,
parks and
they're going to be all high
hyped up on chocolate.
Chocolate. Oh. What was your favorite Easter
poor parents.
What was your favorite Easter candy?
Yeah, just Easter eggs, just chocolate eggs.
Chocolate eggs. Cadbury.
Yeah, mini eggs.
Cream eggs.
Yeah, do you remember, did I send you some mini eggs?
Yes.
They're like a crispy shell. They're my favorite.
Yeah.
They need to make a perfume that smells like mini eggs.
Yeah, I like cream eggs. I love me some
cream eggs
some
nice.
cream eggs. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
You don't get them in America, do you, cream eggs?
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
Oh, do you? You do have them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
We've had those since I was little.
Oh, amazing. Do love a cream egg.
They're not as good as they used to be, though. They're smaller.
No, I think they check. Yes, they're so smaller. Yeah.
Because wasn't Cadbury purchased? Maybe.
Yeah, they were bought out, I think, by Kraft, and the chocolate's changed. It's not the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste the same.
God damn. Ruining everything. Stupid Americans.
Damn Americans ruining our chocolate.
Ruining
How
chocolate.
dare you? Well, happy Easter to you guys. We hope you're having a nice Easter so far and have managed to get away from the kids for 5 minutes. You're probably pulling your hair out already by now, so hopefully we can give you a 5-minute respite out of this. We've got a good case for you this week, one that you've probably not heard of, to be honest. It is a case from Liverpool, and it is the case of Jaw K. Today's case takes us back to 1946 in Liverpool, which is named the friendliest place in England. It's a maritime city in northwest England, which is where the River Mersey meets the Irish Sea. It's famous for the Beatles, Liverpool Football Club, and is also where the first British Chinese newspaper was produced in 1944. Unfortunately, there's a darker side to Liverpool too. As of January 2022, there were 175 murders in Liverpool detectives have yet to solve. This is Crimepedia, and this is Murdered in Liverpool. Okay, Morgan, so the victim from today's case was a 57-year-old Chinese man who is called Jaw K. So I was looking at this and I didn't think that Jaw didn't sound like a very Chinese kind of name. And I wondered if it was actually Jiao, because that sounds more of a Chinese name, Jiao K, than Jaw K. So if I'm pronouncing this wrong, I have checked to see, and the pronunciation that I've had on other things is Jaw K.
How do you spell it?
I read it as it's Jaw, as in jaw, but I wondered whether it was actually Jiao K. This is so. If I am pronouncing this wrong, I do apologise. But in every correspondence that I could find on it that actually had audio, it was actually pronounced as Jaw K.
Okay, all right.
So for the purposes of that, we'll just go with Jaw K. But if it's Jiao, then I apologise. So Jaw K was born in Kaihing in Canton in China on the 30th of August 1889. Okay. He moved to England as a single man in 1913 in August, and he ran a small laundry. He lived above this laundry in a small flat, which was at 44 Scotland Road in Liverpool. I couldn't find out much about his family, actually. I found out that he had the correct identity documents. I found out that he had a Chinese passport. I found out that he had back then they used to give you these certificates to say that you had emigrated to a new country and you weren't an immigrant kind of thing, so he had all the necessary documentation that he was here in the UK legally. I found on Ancestry, of all places, a link to a woman called Mary Ellen Pritchard. She was born in Liverpool in 1905, and it's reported that these two cohabited. They didn't actually get married, which for back in 1913 time, I think that was a bit they cohabited together. It's a bit unheard of. But they lived together at this address at 44 Scotland Road, and they reportedly had 2 children together. Now, I can't find anything out about the children. I just about found out that what his wife was, or his girlfriend was called. There is nothing online or any of the records that I looked through to tell me whether he lived with her at his time of death, where the children lived at his time of death, or whether they were actually living as a family at all at his time of death. There's nothing in the police records that I could see that would tell me that the flat was a family home. So they don't actually mention the fact that it was a family, and there's no mention of his wife, and there's no mention of his children in any of the
Right.
reports that I've read. Okay. Now, Liverpool had a big Chinese community in the 40s. Okay. Liverpool is actually home to the oldest Chinese community in Europe. Since the first Chinese immigrants arrived in Liverpool because of the port, and they arrived in like 1834, and just south of the city centre you'll find Chinatown, which has got all the Chinese businesses, restaurants, that kind of thing, and they've got this beautiful, huge, like ornate Chinese arch at the entrance to Chinatown, which is on Nelson Street. It's a bit like in London. If you go to Chinatown in London, there's a beautiful big ornate gold and red arch that you walk through to get into like Chinatown kind of thing.
I think I saw that when I was in London. Now I'm
Oh, you
thinking about
probably
it.
did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you probably did. Now, on the 1st of February 1946, a woman had said that she'd been to the laundry that day 3 times to collect her laundry. And every time she went, it was closed, which was very strange because Jorkay had never shut the laundry. It was always open in its opening times. It was never closed, never took a day off. The guy just worked there all the time. On the 2nd of February 1946, another lady had visited the laundry to collect her washing, and she found that it was closed. Then an elderly man said that he had been to the laundry on the previous 2 days as well, and on the 3rd day had failed to get a response and thought something was really odd. So he went around the back of the laundry and found the back door open. He went inside, found that his laundry was there, found bits and bobs of his laundry, and then a policeman arrived at the back of the door. Now, it's not documented how the policeman or why the policeman walked around the back of the laundry, whether he was alerted by somebody else, but he did go to the back of the laundry, arrived, saw this old man going through all his stuff there. And the old man then said, look, well, I haven't been able to collect my laundry, so I came around the back to see, if anyone was around the back. It's really strange. And the policeman said, okay, well, I'll have a look around. Had a look around the laundry and then realised that there was an upstairs to the laundry, went upstairs and unfortunately found the body of Jorkay in his bed. Okay. Now, on the 3rd of February, a doctor looked over, obviously the body was taken away, and the doctor actually looked over his injuries. And the injuries that he sustained were very, very brutal. It's a very, very sustained, brutal attack. Now, he had 2 sets of injuries. He had 19 stab wounds on the left side of his body, which varied in different lengths from 1/2 inch to 2.5 inches wide. There was quite a few non-lethal stab wounds to the left side of his chest, left arm, his shoulder, the left side of his face. There were also several wounds that could have caused death. Now, there was one of these was right through his throat, it pierced right through his throat. They had 4 others that had that were deep enough to pierce his chest cavity. One of them penetrated his left lung. There were other wounds on his side. It's mostly concentrated on the left-hand side. So I'm wondering if when he was attacked, he was lay on his right-hand side, which is why the left-hand side has got so many injuries. They had 4 wounds in the top of his scalp. He had 10 small abrasions to the back of his hand and a cut on his left finger. So straight away, when I was looking at this as a crime scene, not knowing the layout of his flat, but the guy's in bed. So I'm thinking, okay, so somebody has come into his flat and has attacked him whilst he's laying on his right-hand side.
Yes.
Or he's laying with his left side closer to the perpetrator. Okay, so the left side has sustained all of the injuries. So with the cuts to his hand and the cuts on his fingers, they would suggest to me that they were then defense wounds. He's put his hand up and that's where he's got these smaller cuts.
Yeah.
Now, the doctor said that there was no disease. He had no disease sufficient enough to have caused death by natural causes. Okay.
He was stabbed, of course.
Well, I was going to say that. I would be like, okay, well, it doesn't matter anyway because he's covered in stab wounds.
Yeah.
So that's obviously caused his death or played a significant part in his death, whether or not he has any type of cancer or heart disease or any kind of other disease. So that was a strange quote from the doctor.
Very strange. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose
Okay.
you have to look anyway for any other, because it could be that he died of a heart attack when, still having all those stabbings, he could have died of a heart attack, You just
Yeah, I understand.
you don't
Yeah.
know. So for cause of death, he had no disease. He was perfectly healthy. Everything was fine. And they believe that death was due to shock and hemorrhage following injuries caused by a sharp instrument.
Now, immediately when you start talking about the number of wounds and that he sustained, that immediately made me start thinking that this was a familiar person to him.
I agree. Yes, correct. Yeah, I agree this too.
Because it's overkill to an extent.
Very personal, isn't it? It seems like a very personal thing.
And when you have so many stab wounds, there's anger involved in that.
I agree.
So that's my first thought.
And to attack somebody who's in bed. So somebody who's in bed who is seemingly caught unawares or caught sleeping, it's not like you've faced somebody straight on. He was actually attacked and killed in his bed. So chances are he was asleep or, groggy or lying in bed.
And just going back, we don't know if he had family. We don't know if anyone else lived in the.
No.
I'm guessing you'd call it an apartment since it was above the laundry.
Yeah. It was like a little apartment upstairs. Yeah.
I don't want to assume, but I'm going to assume. I'm going to assume that it almost sounds like he was the only one there because you haven't mentioned anyone else.
No, I mean, I only found that he had a partner and 2 children, but there's nothing to say that they lived in that laundry or that they were together at the time of his death. There's nothing to say that, he was the father of 2 children. It was only through Ancestry that I found out that he actually did have 2 children and that he had a partner. But there's nothing in the police reports that I read, and there's nothing in the articles on the newspaper articles that I read mentioning her at all. And they don't even describe him as being the father of 2. Like normally in in a news article or something, they say, this guy was murdered. He was a father of 2. But there's nothing. She's not mentioned in any of them coming forward appealing for any information or anything. I mean, we are talking about 1940 something, so 1946. So it's slightly different to what it is now. But still, they would usually mention that he was a father or had a family or something like that.
Interesting.
Which I thought that was strange. I thought it was strange that they don't mention any, and they don't. I know from what I've read of him is that he literally lived in the place that he lived from when he first came over to England. He literally lived in the same place with I think the exception of like 4 months here somewhere where he went to live in Blackpool or went back to Blackpool. That's all that we know about him. Okay, and also the doctor believed that he had been dead for at least 60 hours. So he had lay up there for quite some time before he was found.
60 hours.
Yeah.
But we only heard about people the day that he was found trying to, get their laundry. So we don't know if there was anyone else.
The older guy said he had been trying for 2 days at least to get his laundry.
Okay, gotcha.
So we know that for at least 2 days the laundry was shut. So I mean that's quite sad that he was up there. And from an article that you found, it was reported that he lived alone.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
So there's no mention of his wife or of his children from the article that you found. So
if he was like 56, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good chance that his kids would have been adults by this time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, I don't know when they got married. So I'm assuming he's 57. So I'm assuming, the kids would have been older by the time, he was killed. So the
Yeah.
police carried out inquiries locally and found that Jorke was a very, very well-liked local man, that he was
Yes.
completely harmless. He got on really well with all the local people. He got on really well with all the local children. But he did sometimes take in fellow Chinese people that were visiting the area for whatever reason. I don't know exactly
Oh.
who he had taken in, but it was known that he did sometimes let people stay with him.
So it could have been someone that was staying with them. It could have been part of a
Possibly.
robbery.
Yes. When you say robbery, actually
Mhm.
the whole place had been ransacked. The laundry itself had been completely
Oh.
ransacked. The flat upstairs had been completely ransacked. There was jewelry missing, a clock was missing. And it also reported that carpets were missing. Not really sure
Carpets.
why carpets would be missing,
If
unless
there's
there's some
carpets
kind of
missing if carpets
yeah.
are missing, you would think that someone would see someone pulling
Mm,
carpets out of this flat.
yeah. Well, I mean, and also with the injuries that he sustained, this was quite a frenzied attack. So I think that the assailant would have been covered in blood. And also, I mean, he had a deep wound to his throat that was fatal. He had a punctured lung, in which then I wondered whether would he have aspirated blood? Would that have caused a huge spray of blood? I mean, this isn't going to be a neat murder. This is going to be quite a messy murder.
Yeah.
Um, the the police said that the murder weapon they believed was sharp and strong because one of the wounds had cut straight through a rib.
Oh,
So this
wow.
is
Okay.
something that's, pretty strong. There was another wound that had injured another bone. So I mean, we're talking about something strong enough to go through bone, okay? A
Mm.
passerby did report that a middle-aged man was seen leaving the property via the back door, which he carefully closed behind him before he left. Now, there is no description of this man whatsoever in anything that I have read regarding this case. I couldn't see anything of any articles where they described an assailant leaving or described anybody seen with him or appealing for any witnesses or anything. I couldn't see anything. I mean, they had newspapers back then. We've got articles, from back then that we've read through. So we don't know anything about this male that was seen leaving the property, but we do know that it wasn't unusual for men to stay at that property because he did sometimes let countrymen stay with him for whatever reason, whether that was to make a little bit of money so that he got some rent coming in or what. I'm not actually sure. I don't know if he owned the property because couldn't find out that, because I would be very interested to see whether he rented the property and so he
Mm.
had to then pay for the rent of the property, or whether it
Yeah.
was like a mortgage and he was having to pay a mortgage and it was actually his property. There's not a lot that actually tells you about this at all. The
Right.
inquest into his death was on the 20th of February 1946, and they returned a verdict of murder by some person or persons unknown. This case has then since completely gone cold. Now, it took a testament to him as a person because they did have a funeral on the 11th of February for him, and it was in the Chinese Masonic Hall in Nelson Street, which is where I was telling you about earlier, where that beautiful Chinese arch is. And they had his close friends standing by the coffin, and as tradition is in China, he was actually buried with imitation Chinese money for like good luck going on to the next life kind of
Yeah.
thing. Outside in the street and at the cemetery, there were hundreds of people at his funeral. So this was a really well liked guy. People respected him and really liked him. Because it's gone completely cold, and I could find nothing of any subsequent follow-up investigations, no family appeals for help or anything like that. But when I was searching this case, I also found another unsolved and baffling case that happened on exactly the same day, just 2 miles away from the scene of Jorke's murder. And it happened within hours of his murder.
Oh, okay.
So the second case that I found is a case that was the death of a young boy. Now I've looked, Scotland Road is where Jorke's house was. Okay. And this house for the second case is on Edge Lane, which by car is 9 minutes, a 9-minute drive now. So if you're looking back in the day when there weren't a lot of cars around, you're talking probably walking. If we were to look at it now, walking, it would probably take you just under an hour to walk from one to the other. Okay. So if you've got some kind of vehicle or some kind of way of getting around, it would only take you about 10 minutes to get from one to the other. So this was a case that was on 62 Edge Lane. This was a 3-story Victorian house where the body of Charles Greene was found by his 14-year-old cousin, Ernest Johnson. Now, this is all on the same day, hours apart from Jorkay's murder. Charles's mum, Mary, owned a pawnbrokers, and his dad, Charles Sr., was a plasterer. They had both gone out to a local hotel and left Charles Jr. at home reading his Boy Scout books. Okay.
Yep.
His cousin Ernest had travelled from Anfield to this house to visit his cousin. And his cousin was only 14 and has arrived to see his cousin whilst his mum and dad were out. When he got to the house, the front door was wide open. He thought that was strange, but his cousin was expecting him, so thought maybe he left the door open for him. He walked into the house and walked into the kitchen and found Charles hanging from a clothes error in the kitchen. He, obviously being 14, absolutely panicked, ran to find his auntie and uncle. By the time they had got back, they had obviously realised it was too late. Unfortunately, Charles was already dead. His parents then looked through the house and found that the house had been absolutely ransacked. There was a number of expensive items missing, and the police were called. They got to the scene and believed that this was a case of a murder due to a robbery gone wrong. How they decided it was a murder straight away, I'm not sure, but they did believe that this was a murder straight off. It was treated as a murder.
Right.
6 men were arrested within this case.
6.
Actually, very quickly, within less than a week after Charles was found. Okay. There was an article in the Adelaide Advertiser, which was published a month after Charles died, and it actually named all 6 of these accused men. So they had 2 seamen, James Welsh and Charles Lawrenson. Okay. They had a driver, a guy called Charles Patrick Hamilton, a taxi driver called John Kay, and a decorator called Henry Joseph White. Right. And a guy called Thomas McGlynn. Now, he was also a seaman, but he had gone back to Gibraltar and was flown back to England to be questioned as part of this case.
So John Kay, no relation to Zhao Kay.
No, not that I could find. I did try that because I did see the surname and go,
that's interesting. Yeah.
That's very strange, isn't it? So when Charles's body was examined by the pathologist, there was evidence of bruising to his head, which would suggest a heavy blow to the head before he died. Okay, so this is post-mortem, perimortem. There was a possibility that he was already unconscious when he was hanged from the clothesline. Now, the inquest ruled he could not have carried out that hanging himself. Okay.
Right.
Straight away, that's very strange. Now, I must admit, when I very first read this and read that he was looking through a Boy Scout book, I first of all thought, I wonder if he was practicing knots or he was practicing some kind of like rope stuff, because that's they do that in Boy Scouts and stuff. And I wondered, but then when I heard that he had this blunt force trauma to the back of his head, he's not going to have done that himself and then hung himself, So that's very strange to me. So now, in court, go on.
Real quick. Do we know if any of these 6 men were familiar to the family or to
No.
To Charles?
Not that we know of. No. Completely random.
Let's say that they knock him out. The only reason you would think that they would then kill him is if they could be identified.
If he could identify them, that's right.
Right. Okay.
The other thing I thought was perhaps they hit him and killed him by accident. Because because the mum owns a pawnbrokers. So if they know the mum locally, she owns a pawnbrokers. People that use pawnbrokers are usually people that have issues with money, that are, more affluent people don't use pawnbrokers. So my initial reaction to this was, I wonder if this was somebody or some people who knew what mum did and knew that mum and dad were quite well off. This is what they did.
which to me would mean someone who has used them as a
Yeah.
pawnbroker, right?
Yeah.
Who has been lent money by them,
Yeah.
and they're probably still, in money issue. They're having money issues, and they're like, well, let's go and
Yeah.
take from these
And
guys.
watched and see still that she went out and then
Yeah,
decided to burgle the place and then came across the fact that there was a 14-year-old boy in the house.
right,
And
right.
so, then obviously then robbery also turns to murder.
Yep.
Now, in the court, the prosecution raised the possibility that Charles was knocked unconscious before he was hanged. They also said that he
Mm-hmm.
died from rapid asphyxia, which is obviously very different to Jorkay. There was no evidence of a violent struggle, very different to Jorkay, and therefore the explanation might be that he was incapacitated because of this blunt force trauma to the back of the head. There was no
Yes.
evidence, according to this court case, that there was any accidental or suicidal hanging. The prosecution submitted that they believe that these men had committed burglary together and that hanging this young boy would take at least two people to do. It wouldn't be easy for one
Mm-hmm.
person to do on their own. The
Right.
defense said that Charles was reading the Boy Scout book that evening. They said that his death could have been the result of a terrible accident, which is what I initially thought when I read it too. Unfortunately, only 4 men would face charges of murder and burglary because John Kay and Charles Patrick Hamilton claimed that they never entered the house. Despite taking part in the burglary, they never actually entered the house at all. Okay.
Okay, yes.
So how you burgle a house without entering a house, I don't know. Whether they were lookouts or something like that, out front and
They
back maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't actually
Right.
have anything to do with inside. So there was
But
an
they were still
article.
involved in it,
Of
regardless.
course, yeah,
You
that's
know what's
right. You're
going
telling
on.
me that not one person that went into that house mentioned the fact that they bashed a kid over the head.
Come on.
That's going to have
Come
come
on.
up in subsequent conversations, surely.
Right. Yep.
Now, there was an article published on March 20th of 1946 saying that there was no direct evidence as to which of the accused hanged the boy, and the prosecution alleged constructive homicide against the other 4 that were accused. 40 witnesses were called over the course of the case, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But in May 1946, the court finally returned a verdict of not guilty because, unfortunately, the prosecution were unable to provide any evidence beyond all reasonable doubt that 1 or 2 of these men actually killed Charles. The judge summed up with, and this is a quote from the article, although we're not certain that it was an accident, we are also not certain that it was not. And all 4 men were given not guilty verdicts. However,
Mm-hmm.
they were sentenced, I think, between 3 and 4 years each to jail for burglary. But the actual murder of Charles was never actually proven. So nobody actually faced charges on the murder of him.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is, I would like to have known what they said about Charles when they went into the house. They're not disputing, and they're not saying that they didn't burgle the premises. They're saying that they didn't kill the boy. So if the kid was in the house at the time that he was burgled and they left him and he was fine, I don't think he would have gone and hung himself as soon as they left.
Yeah. Right.
If he was already hanging by the time they got in there, I would have thought they would have seen him and they would have spoken of that. But there seems to be nothing documented about them saying that they found him in there or didn't find him in there. There's nothing. I don't know what their defense was in that.
Can you? I mean,
No. I mean, they obviously got there and he wasn't there, or they got there and he was. So he was either not hanging before they got there, or he was hanging before they got there. So which way round was it? Did they do something to him, which they're gonna lie and say they didn't? But are they going to say he was fine when they got there? We left him in the house. We burgled the house and he's fine.
Let's say you're gonna go and you're gonna break into a house and you're gonna steal jewelry and stuff, right? You walk in the house and you see someone hanging, right? What are you gonna do?
You're gonna go back out.
Oh shit! I know.
Holy shit! Yeah.
You're not gonna go you're not gonna go and say, oh, well, that's easy. Let's go ahead and just take what we can. Because not only are you gonna get nicked for burglary, now you got murder on your hands, right?
Exactly.
No, there's no way that they just happen to walk in and find,
No.
a kid hung to death.
I
No
mean,
way.
no, and looking at the evidence, I think he was murdered because the blunt force trauma to the head swayed me away
Mhm.
from thinking that he had hung himself. My first initial reaction was he's reading a Boy Scout book. Oh God, he's tried some knots or he's tried something, and unfortunately he's ended up hanging himself. But the police and the prosecution are saying that there's no way, there's no evidence of any suicidal hanging.
Mm-mm.
So therefore somebody would have had to have hung him.
So death was due to rapid asphyxiation.
Yeah.
No evidence of any violent struggle.
No, and the only other evidence they had was blunt force trauma to the back of the head, and they
Yeah.
believe that he had sustained this before
Mhm.
death.
Yeah. Yeah, they would know that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's probably
Science doesn't
some.
lie.
It doesn't lie, exactly. So he was rendered unconscious
That's
and
right. And then hung.
then hung up.
Yeah.
But why? But here's the thing. Once again, why? The only reason you
I
do it
agree
is
with
because
you.
you
Yeah.
could be identified.
You could identify it exactly. And so that's what makes me think, was it something to do with the mum's work? Or was it the dad
I
was a
think so.
plasterer? So but I straight away
Mm,
thought mum's got a pawn
mom.
shop. You know, kids go to mum's work. Kids do that
Mhm.
when they're sick, when they're coming home from school, whatever. So is it that this kid knew who was coming into his house, and they've gone, shit,
Mhm.
he can identify us. We didn't expect him to be here because mum and dad had gone out, so they didn't expect the kid to be home. Could
Mhm.
it be it's someone that he knew? Was it somebody who worked for his mum and dad? Or was it somebody who worked with his dad? Was it somebody who with his mum? That
Hmm.
straight away made me think, okay, so one of these six men have got something to do with this. They're saying that only four of them went into the house, the other two didn't. So, okay, those four men, one of which must be known to the kid. Well, I mean, the mum and dad, it hasn't been reported anywhere that the mum and dad knew any of those four men. But doesn't necessarily mean that it was somebody they knew well. You can know somebody as a someone who walks down the street that you see very, and you not know their name.
Mhm.
So could it be
Okay.
something like that? I mean, both of these cases are very different, but the fact that they happened within hours of each other, within 9 miles of each other, and the fact that it was both burglaries made me think, okay, and both businesses, a Chinese laundry, we know that they have money, we know that cash is available at the place, or it's somebody who stayed with Jar K.
Yeah, I
And
think
then
both.
you've got this other one where mum works in a pawnbroker's. They live in quite a nice Victorian house. They've got a bit of money. Expensive items were taken. It just seems too coincidental to me for these two to be totally unrelated.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm reading the statement that Charles Greeny's father gave,
Yeah.
right? And so he stated, this is what I found very interesting. On Saturdays, I generally do all the collecting for my wife's business, right? So he's collecting the money,
He's going and collecting it.
and then he's going to be going home after collecting the
Going
money.
home with it, yeah. So they know that there's money on the property.
So I think that was maybe, well, I don't want to say I think. I guess I could just say I think. It's very possible that's what the target was. If it's someone that knows the habits of the husband and wife, right? The Greenies, they're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, we know
Yeah.
that he's going to collect the money, and then he's going to go home, so we can go and when he gets home, we can take that and take whatever we can.
Yeah.
Huh?
And
Interesting.
if dad does that every week, if they know that he's going to
Mm-hmm.
go and he's going to collect the money every Saturday at a certain time, they know that then he goes home with that money. When they see him and his wife go out, if they're just watching the property, they see him go out and they think, right, now we're going to go and burgle the place, not realizing that the kid was
Right.
home.
Right. Interesting.
It is interesting. And both of these cases are unsolved. There's nothing.
On
ever
the
since.
same
They've just
day.
completely got within, a few miles of each other. I mean, it was, what did I say it was in miles? It
2
was
miles?
2.5 miles.
2.5 miles,
So
okay.
2.5 miles away. Both burglaries, both houses were completely ransacked. Both are businesses that you would there's a lot of cash on the premises
Yes,
for
yeah.
both of these. I
Mhm.
think it's too coincidental to rule them completely separate.
Huh, interesting. I don't know. I mean, could it be coincidental? Yeah, it could.
I think
Man.
there's too many coincidences in this. I know that one was a kid, but I think the kid was an unfortunate I think it was an unfortunate part, a collateral damage part of this. I think the kid, I don't think they went in there to murder him.
Uh-huh.
I think it was,
We just happened to be there,
it
yeah.
was, yeah, he just happened to be there. I think that the whole premises of both of these is burglary. But strange that the people in the property both ended up dead.
The only thing that makes me think it might be just a coincidence
Mm.
is the fact that the murders were completely different, right? One was a stabbing.
Yes, yeah, one was a very frenzied stabbing.
Multiple stabbing, yeah. He's been stabbed multiple times.
Yeah,
What do you say? There were at least 19 on his left side.
19,
So
yeah,
we're talking
yeah,
over 20 tab wounds on him,
yeah.
where Charles Greene was hung. But it might also be the fact that they just used what they had at their disposal.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder again,
Oh, but
was it
they didn't occur on the same day though, right? They
they
didn't
were
occur on the
yeah, it
same
was
day.
the same day.
They were
Yeah,
found on the
no,
same day.
they were found on the same day, yeah.
So, but Jaw K was 2 days earlier.
So the coincidences in this case, or these two cases, is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. There is, I think, there's quite a lot of coincidences. And you found the
Yeah.
statement from Charles's dad,
Right.
where he documented exactly what happened, that day. And it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
What I find, I mean, besides what happened prior to the murder and what happened after, what I found interesting is when he goes through and he's very specific about what was missing from the house,
Yeah.
which includes carpet or
Rugs.
like, okay, rugs. Yeah. So like
Yeah.
we have a carpet a carpet that came from the bedroom on the first landing, a
Yep.
rug which came from the passage between the two bedrooms on the first floor, a rug which came from the lounge on the ground floor, the carpet which also came from the lounge on the ground. So, I mean, we're talking one, two, what, 5 or 6 different carpet or rugs taken from the house?
Yeah, and that was the same. I mean, we had rugs taken from Joel Kay's house as well. We also had
Right.
clocks taken from Joel Kay's house, and the dad documents here that clocks were taken from their
Mm-hmm.
house as well. There was a marble
Yeah.
clock taken, there was a clock taken from the bedroom. So that's strange. So there was burglaries, the same kind of stuff's taken. They're taken on, this is within 2.5 miles of each other. They were both found on the same day, but we know that Jorke was killed a couple of days before, because we know he was dead for 60 hours before they found him. But
Right.
strange that the same stuff is taken. I still think it's too much of a coincidence.
Mm. It is. It is. And you know what? The difference between what we know about these two cases is startling, right?
Mm, yeah.
So Joel K, we really just have the basics. But when it comes to Charles Greene, we have so much specific information.
Yeah, very.
I kind of feel like Charles Greene's murder kind of overshadowed. It obviously did overshadowed
Yeah,
Joel K's.
of course. Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see what else was found in Jaw's case that might be can link to the Charles Greene case as well, if there is anything.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I found very interested about this is that when when they looked at how Charles had died, and when they go through, it
Mm-hmm.
explains, that there's nothing at the post-mortem or at the scene of the crime that would support a suicidal or accidental hanging. He says
Yeah.
that having regard to the higher knot of the two and the weight of Charles Greene, in his view, this is the pathologist, in his view, one man could not have put him in the rope at that height as he was hanging.
Right.
And starting from the point that Charles Greene had apparently been knocked out, the degree of incapacity would have been such that Charles Greene would not have been able to do anything for himself. The structure of the rope was such that if the rope was not in position under the cleat that it hung down from and cleared the chair by several inches, that it could not only be kept from the chair by either not being attached to the cleat. So they're basically saying that he couldn't have done this himself. He couldn't have pulled himself up or hung himself at this rope
Mm-hmm.
because of where the knots were and because it was too high up from the chair that he looked like he had stood on.
Right. It sounds like the pathologist, the doctor, was very adamant about the fact
Very
that
adamant. Yeah.
if he hadn't been rendered unconscious, that he would have seen signs of him fighting,
Yeah.
to save himself. But there
Yeah.
was none.
Strange, isn't it?
Doctor, here, let me read this. The doctor also added that if Charles Greene had been able to use his senses, that he would have thought that it would have been perfectly easy for him to free himself before death.
I personally think that there's quite a lot to these two things. And the fact that the pathologist is so adamant that this wasn't an accidental death. I think it's the similarities between what was taken. I don't know what it is about it. I just think they're linked somehow. I really do think they're linked.
Is it possible? Yes, it is. The only thing, I'm sitting here and I keep going back and forth. I mean, 2 robberies which end in murders. The items that are taken from the house, or the house and the flat, or the laundromat, are very similar to each other.
Yeah.
It sounds like Jockey would have been killed by a single person. Charles Greene when he was hung up, they would have needed at least 2 people?
2 people, it says. Yeah, you wouldn't have been able to do it on your own.
I'm gonna say it's possible that they're related. But I'm not. I can't say definitively. Yeah, I absolutely think that these 2 cases are linked together. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm on the fence with this one. I'm on the fence.
When I look at the pictures of the house, because there are some pictures online of the house, and there are some pictures of where the rope sort of in situ. There are actually pictures of the rope hanging in the kitchen in situ.
Yeah.
I just can't see a young boy doing this. I think it's clear that he was murdered, but not by these men exactly. I can't say that it was definitely them. But the fact that the pathologist is saying that the injuries and the evidence of where the boy was found, and the fact that he had this blunt force trauma to his head, somebody has done that to him. That's not in dispute. What's in dispute is who. But it can't be a coincidence that this house was burgled and then the kid's found dead.
Right.
So it's got to be something to do with this burglary. Unless they went in, they've not said that they found the kid in there, alive or dead. They've not mentioned that they saw a kid at all. I mean, if you were to go into a kitchen and there was a body hanging from the ceiling, you'd remember that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing too, looking at the picture of the rope and how it's tied to, that's really high.
Yeah, very high.
I mean, would an 11-year-old, without even standing on a chair, I think it'd be high for an 11-year-old to tie up to.
And that's what the pathologist is saying. The position of the knots and the position of the rope, he doesn't see that the kid could have done that himself. And I looking at the photos, I agree with him.
And as if he was a Boy Scout or Sea Scout, whatever he was, looking at these knots, it's not even a good knot.
No.
It's not a good knot. It's not something that it is not a knot that someone in a Boy Scouts would have learned to do. It's a very sloppy knot.
And I read through in some of the writing on this case that it was thought that perhaps the defense had said that the kid was making some rope to swing on, and that he had slipped, hit his head on the mantelpiece, and then had got broiled up in this, and then died. No, I don't agree with that. I think that the blunt force trauma to the back of the head, because I think he had like a bruise on like his cheek or his chin or something like that, a small bruise, but that's not enough to render him unconscious, to then be caught up in this rope and then asphyxiate.
Yeah, because they're saying because of where he was hanging was right next to like a
mantelpiece.
like
yeah,
man, and maybe he hit his face. No, get out of here.
That wouldn't have rendered him unconscious.
No.
So is it that these are two completely unrelated cases that just happened to be that they were both found on the same day? Is it just a complete coincidence that the items taken from both premises were similar items? Is it a complete coincidence that both adults, say in this or targets of this property, were both mainly cash orientated businesses?
Right.
Is that all a coincidence, or are we talking about different men going into each property? One man in the first property has killed with a knife because that's just what he's done, and the second time that man didn't go into the property, and so there was no murder by knife.
It's crazy.
It's mad, isn't it? And this case just really, I was looking at it for ages thinking, trying to sort of correlate everything that was similar, and thinking that both of these families, or both of these sets of people, anyone connected with both of these, they've still got no answers from 1946 still.
I mean, this might sound stupid, right? Not every burglar is capable of murder, but every murderer is capable of robbery, right?
Yeah.
So what's the chances that you have two burglaries where someone was willing to murder? Right? So that, I think that takes the possibility of it being not connected down a little bit, at least, right? So you have two situations where someone, I think the primary goal of both these cases is robbery.
Money.
Right?
Yeah. Robbery.
Money to get in and to take what you can and to go. Right?
Yeah.
Then the secondary result of the robbery was murder. And so in the case of Jaw K, it almost sounds like he was asleep and so it was, okay, we need to make sure we can get everything we can. We have him here. We got to take him out so that we can get everything that we need to get.
Yeah.
Where Charles Greene would just happen to be, we weren't expecting. I think it sounds like it was more like they weren't expecting him to be there.
Someone to be there. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, okay, well, we got to get rid of this because now he's seen us and he knows, he can identify us or at least give a description of us. So we need to get rid of him because he is
a witness,
an eyewitness, a witness. Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
But does that make sense though? Like,
yeah,
you need to be looking at it as saying, okay, well, this is someone whose primary goal is money and to rob someone, but they're not against killing to make sure that they don't get caught. Because if it was just a robbery and it's just, you're going to go in like, okay, I'm going to go rob this place. And then it's like, oh, well, there's someone here. Well, what are you going to do? You probably just take off. You're not going to go and say, well, let's kill him. There's a desperation to it, isn't there? There seems like there's a desperation to it for both of these.
I did find, whilst you were talking before, one of the men did actually give a statement about the kid, And they said that the driver stayed in the car, which is one of the people there that that obviously didn't go into the house. So the driver stayed, and then somebody else stood lookout. So that was the two that weren't in the property. They said that they heard music, so they went into the kitchen where the music was playing. Now we know that Dad said that he left the radio on in the kitchen. They said that
Yeah.
they opened the door and peeped in, and they saw a kid on a chair standing looking through the mantelpiece. The other man said, "There's a kid, look." So they looked, saw his trousers. We thought the kid was deaf. We shut the kitchen door. All three of us went upstairs and took turns to see if the kid or anyone else came out of the kitchen. We ransacked the room, burst the panels in the bedroom door, but couldn't get any money. So we took the carpets and clocks and a couple of suits, 2 furs, took them out and put them in the car and drove away.
Come on. Really?
So they looked in the kitchen and saw the kid standing on the chair. So they've admitted that they saw the kid and that he
Standing
was
on the
standing
chair.
on a chair. So
And they said we thought he was deaf. So I think at that point
yeah,
they are indicating that he would have been dead by that point. That's what they're saying.
that's what they're saying.
But here's the thing. Based off of Charles's father's statement,
Yeah.
the chair that he was supposedly standing on was 3 or 4 inches from the bottom of his feet.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have been standing on the chair.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
It's very strange.
Okay, here's the thing. So they're saying that they didn't even know that he was hanging, that he was dead.
Mm.
And you wouldn't question it? Like, you're going through the house and
Yeah, bashing down
when you're done
panels.
when you're done, he's still there in the same position. You're not going to go, "Wait, what the hell's going on?"
Mm.
And if you do, and you see a kid hanging by a rope, and you go, "Oh, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and take whatever you can from the house," you're still a piece of shit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're a piece of shit instead of going what a normal person would go, like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And
Yeah.
trying to render some help.
Yeah.
You go, "No, we need to get these carpets and rugs."
It's just
It doesn't make
strange.
sense.
No. I'd be very interested to know if there were any more burglaries that obviously didn't end in death. I wonder if there were any more burglaries in that area around that
Mm-hmm.
time. Because that would
Right.
be interesting to see if these guys have gone on like a little crime spree. And the two, the 2 times that they've actually encountered people, they've ended up, because it's strange that both times that there's been people, both times they're both dead.
Yeah. Now were the 6 guys, were they found guilty of the robberies, but not
Yeah, they were
guilty
found. The
on
4 were
the
found
murder?
guilty. Yeah, they were
The
found guilty
4.
of robbery, but they weren't found guilty of his murder. So
And we don't
I
know
think
if
they only got minimal sentences, like 2 or 3 years each. They didn't get a lot. They didn't get a lot
so
of.
stupid.
Mm,
And we don't know if they can be connected at all to the laundromat.
no,
Hmm.
we're not sure. I'm not sure whether they can be connected. But I just read it, and as soon as I saw that the article that said this isn't the only, when I was looking through Zhao Kei's murder, and it made me sad. It made me really sad that there isn't enough information on Zhao Kei. There isn't, or Zhao Kei. There's not enough information on him. That there's no crime scene photos that you can see. There's nothing to jog anyone's memory. There's nothing to that no family members have been given any justice. He hasn't, and he, from what I can read, from what people have testified to say, was a really, really nice man, just going about his business in his little laundry, helping people, letting them
Mm-hmm.
stay with him, and ultimately it's ended up in him being brutally murdered. But now it's
Yeah.
forgotten. Now no one's going to be looking at this case anymore because it's such a long time ago. Resources are limited at the moment. So no one's going to be trawling through this old case. There's going to be not very many people that were witness to anything that night that would still be around now.
Right.
And the same,
Yeah.
the same, obviously Charles Greeny's family have kept this going and have talked about it and have, he had somebody there kind of championing for him. But for Zhao Kei, there wasn't really anyone
There wasn't.
to say, no, we need to know what happened. We need to look at this more.
What is the chances that these 2 robberies and a murder, same things are being taken out of the house?
Exactly.
One of the people arrested was, a guy with the last name of K.
Yeah, I know.
And I was
It
just
bugs
reading.
me.
It does. I would want to know more about him
Yeah.
because apparently Zhao K was known, at least to like some people, as Joe, which makes sense because a lot of times, they'll take on Western sound names
Yeah.
to make it easier on those
Yeah.
people, right? So I wonder if the other guy was John K, right? I wonder if John K, what was he? Was he a white guy? Was he Chinese? Because come on, if he's a Chinese guy named John K and you have a similar crime against a guy named Zhao K, gotta put two and two together.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we don't have any information on him.
No,
I don't know. Yeah.
No. And I think for me, the similarities in this were a little bit there's too many similarities for this to be completely unrelated. I feel it was, the similarities are a little bit, there's too much too similar, I think. And I'm sad. I'm just really sad that both of these cases are still unsolved. And the chances are the perpetrator we lost a long time ago.
Mm. Well, I think we know who was at least involved in the death of Charles.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's just which ones.
Yeah, exactly. God, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So that's this week's case for you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. No worries.
Those are both very interesting cases.
Yeah, and you can look it up. If you can look up Charles Greene. There's a lot of pictures on unsolved murders. There's a lot of paperwork on him, but not so much on Zhao K. But if you find anything,
fortunate.
Yeah, if you do find anything, I'd love to see it. So if you are looking online and you do find something that we haven't mentioned, then I would love for you to send it over because I would like to know a little bit more about this. So at this time in our show, what we do like to do is give you something to smile about. And we have a segment which we like to call Dumb Criminal.
Hey, Captain Stupid Poopy Pants, use a dummy.
Use a dummy.
You is a dummy.
Use a dummy. So, Sherry, there are a few places in the world that you really don't want to commit crimes, right? Because punishments can be really harsh.
Yeah.
Laws are very strict. One of these places is Singapore.
Yes.
Singapore, you do not want to commit crime. In Singapore, you might get caned if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So, right. Now, a 49-year-old man just a few weeks ago made a wrong turn and ended up in a immigration clearance lane of the departure car zone at a border checkpoint in Singapore. Okay. So, don't know exactly where he was trying to go, but he wasn't trying to leave Singapore.
Oh.
And he definitely was not trying to leave Singapore because when he got to the checkpoint, it was found that he had no valid identity or travel documents with him.
I'm confused. Okay, so what was he doing?
Okay. He was driving. I don't know. He was driving. He was probably going home or going to a friend's house or somewhere. We don't know.
He's just taking
a wrong turn.
Okay.
He made a wrong turn and ended up in a departure car lane to leave Singapore.
To leave. Okay. Oh, no.
Now, because he didn't have a valid identity or travel documents with him.
Oh, no.
They ended up doing a biometric screening of this man, and they were able to discover that he had provided a false identity to the border control agents. Okay?
Why?
So that's the first issue. Well, upon doing a body search, the driver was found to have 3 vape pens with him and a cable knife. Okay?
Right.
Vaping in Singapore is illegal. Smoking in Singapore is illegal.
Okay? Oh, okay.
Having a knife on him was illegal. So that's a big, big issue. Now, in addition to this, the man also had controlled drugs with him. He had about 332 grams of crystal methamphetamine.
Oh, my God.
And 28 grams of heroin on him, which had a estimated street value of $52,000.
$52,000?
Yes. Now, officers also found suspected drug paraphernalia, 3 kitchen knives, and an electronic vaporizer refill. Okay. So obviously the driver was arrested and investigations began immediately by the Central Narcotics Bureau. So once again, if you're in Singapore, don't try to commit crime. Don't have vape pens with you. Don't have controlled drugs with you.
Use your sat nav. Drive in the right lane, people.
Now, drive in the right lane. Make sure you do not take a wrong turn
No.
and end up at border control. So holy hell. Could you imagine what was going through his head when he like made that turn? And because once you get into like those lanes, those like departure lanes or whatever, there's no way to turn around.
I don't know, because we don't have stuff like that here.
Oh,
we
yeah,
don't,
you're an island.
we don't have it where you can go like from one into the other. So we don't have it where you cross over into like another country like that.
Yeah. I mean, you have up until a point where you can like turn, but there's like this, there's obviously like places where it's like you get to this like area where it's like, nope, you can't turn. There's like
no way back. No way back.
You have to go through because you only look suspicious if you're like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and turn around. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. He must be thinking, oh shit, I've got all this stuff in my car. Oh my God, please don't search me. Please don't search me. I've got no documents. They're going to search me. He must have been, and then all that stuff though, he's got all that stuff on him.
I wonder like what would be the sentence for someone in Singapore for having drug possession?
I don't know.
I don't know. Here, I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, look it up and see.
Currently, those found in possession of controlled drugs can face a maximum of 10 years jail and/or a fine of $20,000. There is no statutory minimum for any amount of drugs, so they don't have a minimum sentence.
So there isn't a minimum sentence.
Yeah, so at least 10 years.
Ooh, God.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mad, yeah.
That is a lot. That is a lot of drugs he had on him.
That is a lot of drugs on him, and he must have been kicking himself for driving in the wrong lane. Good. Well, I'm glad because he got caught because those drugs would have been on their way to individuals who are addicted, and he probably would have made quite a lot of money from it. So I'm glad that he got done for that.
Yeah, he is a dummy, but thank God he was a dummy.
Yeah, I'm really pleased he was a dummy and he made that mistake because that's a lot of people better off without that individual. Loser.
So there you go.
Thank you very, very much. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed this episode. Thank you for all of your lovely reviews. If you would like to leave us a review, not only will we love you forever, but we'll say a thank you to you on the show as well. So if you would like to give us a review, you can head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, anywhere that you can leave a review for us, and we will be eternally grateful. We will be back next week with another episode. It'll be Morgan's episode. And for now, be nice.
And bye.